Shalom, 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 and welcome to Yah's Prophetic Poetry. I'm super excited tonight. I'm going to bring on my illustrious co-host, Stephen Workington.
Shalom.
And hey, how are you doing, Stephen?
Excellent. It's been a hot minute since we got to do a live, so this is exciting and nerve-wracking, and I can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, this is a treat for us. I'm really excited to introduce Andrew Hoy here with his and with his project of 314. And he's been doing it for a long time, and he's put a lot of work into this, and I'm really excited for him to be able to share more, and hopefully we can get more people excited about this so that we can start making this a reality. So
Yeah,
anyways,
absolutely.
without any further ado, we're gonna bring him on. Shalom, Andrew, how are you doing?
Doing right. How are you doing, Jonathan? Stephen?
Really good.
Excellent. It's a little warm in here. I cranked up the wood stove so the kids would go to sleep, and now I'm sweating a bit, but it's nice change from the last about 6 winters, so I won't complain.
We were having a little bit of a technical difficulty, so sorry that we weren't on, but we're pretty close. Only a few minutes off. So Andrew has had some really cool background stuff and trying to get this all together. But anyways, we brought you on tonight to share what you're all about, who you are, your background, whatever you want to share. The floor is going to be yours tonight. We'll have probably a couple of questions later on, Stephen and I, and we'll see where you're at. And if you're interested in taking any from the audience, we can do that too if you're interested. So, anyways, blessings, and yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Jonathan. Stephen, it's nice to be here. Thanks for the invite on the host here. But yeah, my name is Andrew Hoy. I am the founder of Project 314. I'm a mechanical engineer, and back in 2014, I kind of haphazardly, if you will, if there's such a thing, discovered the pi constant within the book of Exodus. And I found that in, when I say the pi constant, pi goes on and on and on and on. But anyway, the approximation of pi, which is 3.14, which is the most accurate ancient recording that we have of this, this pi constant being known to humanity here. And of course, we find this in the Bible. So, I mean, actually, there is reason to believe there's a representation of the pi constant in Genesis 1:1 that actually goes to 4 digits. But that's kind of using just kind of a strange formula. As for the one that's in Exodus, kind of comes, it's hidden in plain sight, but it comes through just examining the curtains. Everyone kind of like starts yawning whenever it's mentioned the curtains, and that's actually where I found it. So it's kind of as exciting to most people as the begatting thing. Such and such begat such and such and such and Methuselah. People don't like lineages, and they also don't like Bible numbers unless they're really kind of predisposed geeky that way. Because it's like, well, what does all this mean? And so in discovering that, I'm like, I just kept pulling a thread and saying, well, because that's a big, pointer to the circle. So for those who are not aware, the pi constant, or pi, 3.14159, 2, it just goes on and on. Anyway, it's expressing the ratio between a circle's circumference and its diameter. So that's what I found, how I found it, just kind of more incidentally. And then I started looking at the rest of it. And back in 2011, I went to Israel to learn Hebrew. And in that, I learned also to not trust my English Bible. So, or being highly skeptical of it anyway. And that's a slap in the face. That's a slap in the face to a lot of people. I'm not trying to, slap people in the face as I'm waking them up. But, anyone who wants to play the sola scriptura game and wants to also then say, or be either a King James only or think that all these other translations are scholarly. They're all King James amped up, or just the same translator paradigms are held in most all these, and the differences are really trivial. But when you start looking at the Hebrew, then it really starts coming alive, as far as the detail, and it's like in this count in particular. So the way that it translates out in English, it's very awkward English. And, a lot of people I think have not accepted my premise here is credible, and I would even say hypothesis, but it really goes beyond hypothesis at this point because, I've proven, beyond a reasonable doubt, 6 ways from Sunday, I've actually got, physical models I've built, to represent what's in the text, which I can do word for word, what they can't. And that's part of the problem is everyone's interpretation. Even when you go to the English, you could go to a Google search right now and type in tabernacle and see what it looks like. Well, it looks like a whole bunch of different things, but one thing is consistent. They have this dopey box shape with a courtyard, and everyone's like, well, it says 50 by 100, and so as far as they're concerned, case closed. And this guy's just an idiot trying to make a name for himself. He's trying to, get people to distrust in the Bible, and whatever other accusations, or but mostly it's ignorance, because I haven't been challenged on this by too many people of note or of authority, and so they're whether they're trying to wish it away or just thinking that I'm crazy, I don't know. They can think I'm crazy, and that's fine. But this discovery and getting into the kind of the flesh and bones exegesis on it, it's really exciting content. And so I founded back in 2014 then Project 314 for Tabernacle Research and Restoration. Research in that we're always learning more about it, but also trying to share the results of the research and restoration. Again, before we restore anything physically, we got to restore it in the minds of people, and so this is where I'm at on both fronts. And so I've embarked on a number of modeling projects. I've just started one kind of recently for a larger. I actually, when I say I've been in the process of refining a 1/75th scale model, which is something that you can build on a kitchen table real easy with your kids. Yeah. And then I've also got a either a 6th scale or a 5th scale or a quarter scale in progress. I'm as of today, I just moved into a shop where I'm starting to build. And so this is a paradigm. I'm sorry, this is a very direction shifting point in the course of the project. As far as being able to do this larger scale modeling is really it's exciting, and I'm just almost intimidated by it because it's quite an undertaking. But
how big is the shop you just got?
Well, the shop is let's see, 24 feet by 40 feet, or if you kind of prefer, maybe 10 meters ish by what is that, 8 by 10 meters if you metric people.
Oh yeah. No, we're feet still up here.
That's about as big as the space I was living in for the last 2 years. So that's a pretty big shop, though. Small house, big shop. Yeah.
Yeah. And realistically, I can't set the thing up in there, but what I can do is, a lot of these pieces are big pieces, and I have a number of different, what do you call it, manufacturing operations I need to conduct. I need lay down space and all that kind of stuff. So this is a real. And it's a good location for me, and so I'm really it's actually wood stove heat too. So
nice,
perfect.
Check some of the shavings in there.
Yeah, it's not probably actually you in BC you're dealing with a lot of the you get kept warm a little bit by the Pacific Ocean there, but
if you're on the other side of the mountains. We got mountains in between us and the ocean.
Sometimes it brings like these pressure systems, or they say like these atmospheric stream the one year, then it's a low pressure front the next, a Nordic chill the next. Like they keep changing the names, but the wind changes, comes down kind of from the west and the north, blows in over the ocean, and it gives us a bunch of snow or a big cold chill for a week or two at a time. And where I live, it's not too bad. It's pretty hot in the summer and it's pretty mild in the winter, but you get 2 to 3 weeks out of the winter that it can get down to -25, -35. That's Celsius. I don't know what that is in American, but
Well,
in yeah,
that's where they
cold. It's
match,
cold.
right?
Yeah.
That's where they match. The scales
Yes.
match at is it minus 40 or minus
It's minus
20? I always
40.
forget.
Yeah,
Minus
minus
40.
40. Yeah.
Yeah.
Minus 40. So the colder it gets, the more they match.
Yeah, yeah. For me, I'm about 9 hours north of where Steven lives. So he lives in
Well,
we call it
seven if you drive like
yeah, I
me.
guess.
So yeah,
Yeah.
no brakes.
But he lives more in we call it pear country or they grow a lot of fruits and stuff
Like
down there. So
peaches, like fruit trees and
Yeah.
stuff. It's kind of like little California up here.
yeah.
Okay.
It's on this nice little plateau. There's lakes, rivers, and I'm right between Kelowna and Kamloops, so it's kind of gets to like party central out here in the summer, and there's tourists everywhere. And then fall comes, everyone goes back to school, and then me and the kids can go out and walk around the woods without getting people running us over all the time. So it's
Yeah.
really beautiful. We're really blessed to be here, and but it's expensive. BC means bring cash. Like you gotta, the wife and I both work opposite, each other. We hardly see each other, and then we got 2 kids that we homeschool, ages 7 and 5. So we're busy all the time, busy. But now we're kind of moving into winter. I just finally got all the firewood done today, and so now it's into just having the fire going. Snow's coming tonight for the next 3 nights apparently. So it'll just be sledding with the kids, homeschool, hot cocoa by the fire, and then hopefully a lot more of these live streams and studies and things like that. It was a hectic summer moving. Had to move. We used to live in an RV, but our Heavenly Father blessed us with this house out of nowhere. Last minute, we got a place, and we had to move within like 10 days. And so we moved in here, and we just going like crazy trying to get firewood and the house organized. And I bought a truck so I could, we're way up the mountain now. So if it could snow 3 feet overnight, and then how are we going to get out of here if there's an emergency or the wife has to go to work? Or so I was like, bought a truck, and then I put a lot of money and time into that, and it's still an ongoing project, but we've been fairly blessed. So I'm just happy to. It's almost like a little report. I've been in this faith walk almost 2 years now, and if you watch our testimony video, I think it's the 3rd video that we did. I said the thing that really got me intrigued, because Jonathan and I were brother-in-laws, right? But we talk all the time on the phone for about a good year, and he started getting into the Torah and studying it, and me and him talked a lot about flat Earth and things like that. And he's like, one thing I've noticed since I started wearing seats and really put my heart into this, I haven't had to like worry about money. And I was like, man, that sounds awesome. Like I've always been stressed about money. It's like, so it wasn't the main reason, but it always in the back of my mind. And when I finally circumcised my heart and went into this all in, I stopped worrying about money too, and I don't have any more money than I ever had. I almost have less most of the time, but I have food, I have shelter, vehicles. There's always, I got lots of stories about having no money and people just, here's some food, right? So I'm just like, I kind of laugh because at the time I was kind of materialistic, like I would like more money, but I don't worry about money. I just kind of do the Matthew 6 thing, seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all your needs are taken care of. So that's one thing that's been one of my main focuses for the last 2 years.
So Andrew, you're from it's Wyoming, right? Not Wyoming, sorry. Wisconsin, sorry. All those W's and so many states down there to remember them all. But yeah, so were you when you were first started looking into this, were you living there at the time, or were you in
no, I was living in Wisconsin. Yeah.
You were okay.
Yeah.
And it was, but you went to Israel for a time period, right? Correct?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Left there in 2012.
Okay. And so when you came back is when you started seeing this aspect of the tabernacle. And
well, it wasn't that direct in that sense. In 2005, that was the first time I went to Israel. So I made a trip to Israel, and that was kind of first ever. And anyone who has the means to do so, just highly recommend it. It's a little weird now, I suppose, with this ongoing military
conflict and yeah.
military strife and everything. But apart from that, it's an amazing place, and it can change you. I think is a lot of people who go there. It's um, so having on the airplane, I was first reading The Maker's Diet, which is a book by Jordan Rubin, and Jordan Rubin, he's basically he was a college kid, and so this is his testimony. He came down with Crohn's disease, and his parents were both doctors, so spared no expense at trying to heal this kid, and so he went all over the world, trying to get well, and he finally got to a doctor who said, okay, eat all organic and all kosher, and suddenly, boom, he's got within 6 months, he's full health again. So before he looked like a Japanese POW camp survivor, and then after he went kosher organic, his system started processing food right again. So, I read this book, and I was like, well, this is a fascinating testimony, but I'm like, exegesis, it's missing this, it's missing that, and so it's kind of haunting me for about 2 years. I kind of got the urge to write, and so I'm like, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do it. And so then I eventually started doing it. Well, I started that venture in 2007, and writing a book is it's kind of like having, maybe, I don't know if it's like having a child, but it's like, it's something that you put a lot of time and focus on and all that. So I'd done that, and I was working myself into in and through the subject matter, and as I would write it, I would end up learning more, and I'm like, oh, I can't publish this because this is nonsense. Because so there's so many times I just came upon translation problems, and that was before I went to Israel, where I was starting to realize it's like, okay, my understanding is off here, it's off there. And so after I went to Israel, I came back and finished the book, and in finishing the book, there's just certain stuff I have in Hebrew. I basically prove that kosher goes all the way back to Genesis 1. When I say kosher, I don't mean the term itself. Kosher only, the word kashar only appears in the Bible, I want to say 1 or 3 times or something. It's not many. And it's not used in conjunction with food, but it's in a generic sense, it's referring to that which is acceptable.
Yeah.
And so
Clean.
we think, well, yeah, I mean,
Or-
the fact that it's applied to clean, the Jews have done that to the point where everyone thinks that kosher is referring to food, when biblically speaking, it's not. And it is referring to, again, that which is acceptable, and the most generic thing. So we think we're talking slang. It's like, oh yeah, that wouldn't be kosher if they did that. We think that's slang, but that's actually proper usage of it.
Nice.
From a Hebrew standpoint. So when I saw that I was able to look at Genesis 1 and basically prove kosher from Genesis 1. And why was I able to do that? Just because I walked away from the translation. So that experience, it kind of primed me to discover the tabernacle, because I realized, some of these pitfalls of translation and how off they really were. And this is what, as I was studying a different topic, this is what kind of brought me to the world of Exodus and the tabernacle. I had no intention of studying the tabernacle whatsoever. It goes back into this whole thing. Well, that's boring, and if you look at this thing behind my left to you shoulder, you can see it's like, well, who'd want to study it? I think it's an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment to the faith. It really is, because it's like, so this is, this is why they left Egypt, this place of pyramids and all these building wonders, is so they could make this thing, this shoebox looking thing. And again, nobody depicts it all the same. There's some similarities, but there's always different nuance, and it's because they're trying to force fit a paradigm on text that it doesn't match. So,
something I always thought between the two, like between yours and that, like everybody thinks about it being in the wilderness for 40 years, but they don't think about the other 400 years was at Shiloh. Now, it did rain in Israel, And then, is it going to be a muddy mess? Is it going to be, like, I don't know. The logistics to it just never made sense to me. Even as a kid, I remember looking at it and be like, that's kind of funny looking. I don't know how that would actually work, but
yeah, if you ever go camping, you don't want a flat roof with anything soft. It's just the water's gonna come in it.
Yeah.
Keep
And a
going,
tarp,
sorry.
the tarp will pool water like no one's business, right? And it's
Yeah, that's why I camp inside my house now. I do Sukkot inside. Yeah, I've had enough of those. The kids like going outside, but I've had enough of those tarps coming in on me. So, yeah.
I'm sure there's some sort of halakha that would permit you to anyone who's north of I don't know 45 degrees north latitude it's got some special inside provision because for us to dwell in booths that time of year in the areas we live, it's just like can get a little cold.
Yes.
Yeah, need one of those canvas tents with the wood stove in it. It's good to like -50, I think, but that's I don't have that. So living room.
I did do that this year. I had quite a few guys that actually have that, and for Sukkot we did have those canvas tents and with the wood stove, so it was nice.
Well, but you guys have igloos, and so where do you think they got? Where's that idea come from, right? So, from the standpoint of etymology, I know you guys are kind of word nerds a little bit, and igloo, the gull, you hear the GL sound, right? So, like Gilgal, right, is another place, the place of the skull. It's actually making reference to things that are a mound. Okay, so
cool.
Galosh in Hebrew is surfing, or is that skiing? But the idea of kind of coming down a mound is kind of the, so anyway, this term. So you hear that gull, ugalo. So this is kind of when I say an Edenics principle, and I always tend to recommend that book to people if they on the origin of speeches. Isaac Mosen. He gets into a lot, and there's actually a lot of really practical translation applications for people who are wanting to go back and learn the Hebrew language. Like Yom Kippur, right, is the Day of Atonement. Kippur is the fact that they translated it as atonement. It's like, well, when do you use the word atonement in English? Do you go to the store and make atonement for something? Even if your kid steals something and it's like, hey, I would like to make atonement for that. It's like, well, that might spill over from a religious upbringing, but in general, we don't use the word. It's like you wouldn't use that word in business so much. I mean, you generally don't. So where does this come from? And the real word, again, Kippur is Hebrew, and you hear the word cover in a cover between the P's and the F's. In Hebrew, you get the same letter, pei and fe, and it's because the way that you're making these sounds with the lips, it is very close. And between the P and the F and the V, there's a very there's a relationship as far as the phonics, the sounding of it. So the way that these then they mutate going through all these different cultures over the course of time. So you can hear how Kippur is cover, or even arguably copper, right? So copper is something that they would beat down by hammer and make a thin, you could make a covering to a pot. So I would suspect that that's really where the etymology of copper stems from is that idea. In Hebrew, nechoshet is copper, and that comes from nachash, and nachash is the word is translated as snake or serpent, right? So it's like, well, what do you got? Something coiled up. And so again, the Hebrew makes more sense than anything all the time, and sometimes we can bring these. And actually, nachash, if you look at it backwards, sanak, snake, is found in nachash. It's backwards.
Look at that, eh? Yeah.
Yep.
Now, isn't there a word that comes out as evil, but it's backwards? I can't remember exactly. It was it's not on my question list for you, but it just reminded me of it. Like the word evil in Hebrew was something else the other way around in English or something. It's been a long time since I looked at it. Can't remember what it is now.
Yeah, I would have to think on that. It's kind of edge of my brain. I should know that.
Yeah,
Off the top of my head here, so.
there was a rabbi we used to listen to, just kind of before I just started coming into understanding Torah and stuff. It was Rabbi Daniel Lapid. He writes the Ten Commandments about business, I think it is, or something like that. He has like 3 or 4 books out there. Pretty famous. He's from Seattle. Anyways, he talks a lot of words like that. He does talk about that word evil. I don't remember what it was or not, but one of the other ones I was thinking about when you're talking about that is like the word mercy seat in English, and that that there's no seat,
Propitiation.
or
Yeah.
it's the atonement covering or something like that, or like the covering.
Yeah, the idea of mercy and the idea of seat. So you have kasa. I mean, um, whether kasa is referring to the covering or a chair. Like if you're sitting down on something, it's like, well, now I'm covering the chair, but it doesn't make me doesn't make all seats. Oh, I'm sorry, it doesn't turn every cover into a chair top, right?
Mm-hmm.
And same thing with mercy. Chen is, and so you don't find that word coupled together. And so why why the translators have opted to call this the mercy seat. It's like, okay, well, the Almighty, he is merciful.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you want to say that he sits between the cherubim, so then you can infer seat, right, from that, some of that language. So it's not to say they get this in a total vacuum, but on the flip side, it's like, just leave the language alone, let it speak for itself, and let, translate as raw and literal as you can, as mechanical and awkward. We don't need Shakespeare to understand the Bible. We don't need, if anyone thinks that, some people think that King James sounds very poetic, and it's like, well, I was never in the thespian crowd or whatever to do, all this fine arts acting, but I'm just I don't. It sounds eloquent, just like anyone who's coming from anyone from England automatically sounds smart to us, right? Because it's like, oh, they got the proper English, and we're just talking. And Wisconsin being as far north of the border, I'm sure people consider that I have an accent, and it's like, well, you don't think you have an accent until you go someplace else, right?
Yeah.
And so, with respect to the accent, I was calling a place on the phone for work at one point, shopping for some basically large gas valves, and so I asked the guy, it's like, hey, you have anything, in a 6-inch or an 8-inch? He's like, well, because it's like, yeah, that would be like that would be enough to heat all of Toronto or something. But when I was talking to them, they were thinking I was Canadian, because we might throw in an A here or there, right? But
we get the take off, you hoser, that kind of stuff. Strange Brew.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody has watched
Oh, yeah.
that, but famous.
You call everybody buds. Hey, buds.
Yeah.
Like, or bro out here. A lot of it's bro.
We wear toques.
Yeah, we're toques, and we
only
drink
have a
maple syrup
12-hour
to
cycle.
start our day. Yeah, but I actually have a question for you, Andrew, about talking about words here. The word tabernacle, I was just watching, trying to brush up and study up a bit on some of your content you made there on your channel. And if I recall correctly, the word tabernacle means or something to do with it being made in the image of God, or tied to that imagery.
Well, you have a number of words that are being used in this capacity of so you get the tent of meeting, is one way it's translated, and the other one is tabernacle, and the other one is you were just mentioning it, this idea of in the image thing. So getting into these terms, so ohel, I actually had my Hebrew teacher in Israel gave us a mnemonic to remember how these word tent in ohel is the Hebrew word for it, and she actually she's 5 foot, probably 95 pounds, dripping wet, but she had this voice, and this is the power of Hebrew. That when they speak Hebrew, they learn how to pronounce things gutturally, so they really project. And she had I think she was actually a drill sergeant, but she had the voice and the power of a drill sergeant, and she said, because she didn't like the Army, but they all spend time in the Army, right? And she says, here's how you remember "Oh hell" is tent. Say, "Oh hell, I'm in a tent."
Oh.
And so that's the basic word is translating out as tent. So that's used in conjunction with the tent of meeting. And the tent of meeting, actually, if you take a look behind me, the tent of meeting is defined by, the other shoulder here, by this, I can't, the courtyard, which
the outer,
I'm touching the
Oh,
white, right? So,
yeah.
so this is where the totality of that is. The Ohel Moed is the tent of appointed times, or tent of seasons, or tent of Moedim, right? Moed, Ohel Moed. And so this idea that it's, I actually have an article on talking about how this is I think they use this as a clock and a calendar in part, right? Because it's this big
That's
tall
fascinating
thing,
to me. That's cool.
kind of sundial like, etc. But what else is it? What else is it intended to do and convey? So it's another point and purpose of the people who are so, oh, this doesn't do anything and doesn't mean anything in my life. So I'm trying to elevate people beyond that simpleton thinking of like, oh, if it's not a salvation issue, it must not matter.
Or it happened to the Israelites thousands of years ago. That's good for Sunday school,
right?
But now we're upstairs in the pews. It's all Jesus and tithes, right? Yeah.
And then never mind how Paul said something about these things being written for our instruction, right? It's in a practical present tense thing. So, but anyway, the Ohel Moed is being bound by that exterior, whereas the Mishkan then is defined by 10 curtains, which is basically Exodus 26:1 through verse 6. So it talks about the Mishkan being 10 Uriot, or 10 of these curtains or fluttering things. And so that's getting into the second definition. Mishkan is getting in the etymology of that. You got, and this is another, to credit Mosen, I didn't realize this until reading some of Mosen's stuff kind of recently. It was, Mishkan, we get the Hebrew word Shekan, okay, that you have the Shekinah glory, or Shekinah, as people say, right?
Yeah.
And so
one of my questions, so this is good.
For whatever reason, this Shekinah glory, or whether they're saying Shekinah or Shekinah, is a very, it's one of these things where, why do they call a thing a place, or a place, why use a proper noun or a common noun? Like, for example, if you have Bethlehem, what is it? Beit Lechem, so Beit is house, Lechem is bread. Why not translate it as the house of bread? Well, no, because Jesus was born in Bethlehem. It's like, all right. So, but to say that he was born in the house of bread, was that freak us out too much? I mean, to say house of bread, why transliterate in one place and then translate in another place?
Which it shouldn't, because it shouldn't, because it's like, right, he's called, he's our bread, our daily bread. He breaks, like, it doesn't mean, like, I don't get why we should be so freaked out by this, but we are.
Well, and house of bread, that would be the showbread in the tabernacle, right? It could be thought of like that.
Yeah, that's a good point in correlation. Or you have manna or whatever, right? So, but let's think about this just from the standpoint of why do we do this? Why do we translate some words and transliterate others? And oftentimes, the reason that they transliterate some is like, well, we don't. They actively admit they don't know what it means or meant. And so I kind of go into this in my webinar. So I got a webinar coming up starting this Saturday night, actually. And I'm I think the fourth session, I'm getting into the priest garments. It's like, so in the priest garments, you have the ephod, right? Well, what else do you have besides ephod? Well, you have the breastplate. Well, why is it, the Hebrew word for ephod?
No,
it's ephod.
No, perfect.
So it's been transliterated. Yeah.
Do you know the Hebrew word for chocolate?
Chocolate.
Ah.
The Hebrew word for radio? Radio.
Radio. Yeah.
etc. Right? So, but we get yain in Hebrew. This is where we get the word wine from, right?
Mm.
So you have all these carryovers and things like that. So the breastplate is the choshen. So why is it that we've got the ephod in Hebrew and then the choshen in English, or the breastplate in English?
Mm.
It's just one of these things. It's in my opinion indicative of the fact that they're grasping at straws.
Yeah.
You look up the word cherubim or cherub or cherubim in Google Translate, and in every single language, it's transliterated. Like I
Mm.
checked 70 languages on that. It's all
Wow.
transliterated. So going back to this issue of Mishkan, right? Shekan, so Shekinah glory. So this idea of this is where the word skin comes from, sakana, right?
Hmm.
And which it actually also sounds a little bit like snake, right? So it has two of the, it's got the shin and the noon. Um, let's see, nakash, actually between a chet and versus a, a kaf versus a chet, which are very similar sounding things. But what are these creatures, these reptiles, when they're growing, what do? They shed their skin. The
Mm.
snake sheds its skin.
Hmm.
So you start
Mm.
hearing, and there's a guy named was it Rabbi Mordecai Kraft. He's got a really interesting YouTube on this sort of thing where he's talking about the Hebrew is actually likened unto elements of the periodic table. We know what H2O is. We know what the H does. We know what the O does when you mix O with different things and so forth. And so I think he's very profound in thinking of it in that regard, where he's like, we have, these are building blocks of creations. These very words are, these very letters. This is the system that was divinely used. And I guess you get into Iver, Ivrit. Oh, so Ivrit, we have the idea of the one who crossed over. Everyone likes to say.
Mhm.
So aver is guess what the Hebrew word best relates to it? The English word over. Over, aver, you can again hear like copper, kippur, cover. So you have a over is very much in the same thing. But where was I going with that? Was trying to double back to my snake and my nakash and these elements, these phonic and also written things we call letters in language and words, and they all have this Hebrew primacy. So there's Jewish tradition that says that there was a guy who stood against them in building the Tower of Babel, and they said it was Aver, and so this Ever was saying no to the Tower of Babel, where they were told to fill the earth and go their various ways. And they said, no, we're going to all get together, we're going to build a city, and we're going to centralize here, we're going to make a tower to heaven. So it's like it was very opposite of what they were commanded. So it is said within some Jewish tradition that Ever was, he's a great grandfather of Abraham, or great or whatever. I don't know. He's between Noah and Abraham somewhere, but he was the one who, at the time of the Tower of Babel, he said no and was given the privilege of preserving the Hebrew tongue.
Mm.
And so you can believe that Hebrew is not the oldest language. I personally believe it is, and you can say, well, it was a little corrupted at the time of Babel, and I would consider that as an in part possibility. But from a language primacy standpoint, if we realize that Hebrew is the point of origin, and the story of the Bible is true, it's like, well, we're given this divine language. The Torah is given, not in Greek, it's given in Hebrew. And well, some things say that Aramaic is older and everything, but or that some of the Hebrew words were borrowed from other cultures and all that. I think that's just a bunch of junk. But
Question for you then. With the Septuagint, does that, when you're looking at the tabernacle and stuff like that, does it mess up a lot there too, or?
Well, there's a particular detail that I've made notice of, and they strike out the word for clockwise, because you're told to build this thing, the frame of this clockwise, basically. So they omit that. So in my opinion, this is indicative of inferiority as far as of revelation. I also did another article with with Jeff Benner, Ancient Hebrew Resource Center, AHRC. If anyone's interested in Paleo Hebrew, he's got a lot of very, I mean, I think that this paradigm shift that I've discovered here is big, but I'll say that in comparison to Jeff's research, the significance of this is a little lesser. Everyone says, oh, you got to learn the culture, the ancient Hebrew culture. I said, no, you got to learn the language, because the language is the conveyor, the preserver of thought and idea. And so it's from the language that we should be able to infer a culture, or that a culture is, becomes the byproduct of that, the standards, the ethics, the mores, whatever, the syntax, the notations, because and it talks about that in Zephaniah, right? It says Zephaniah 3:8, 3:9. This is where every single letter of the Hebrew alphabet is represented. And it's talking about a time when we all come to serve the Almighty with one consent. And, that's when we're restored to what? A pure tongue. So, we're just all, we're arguing over various shades of brown in English. And it's like, I think we got better things to do in our understanding. And our understanding, if it's not rooted in the language, then we're just borrowing other people's ideas and regurgitating. But I was going to try to conclude that question on the Mishkan and the skin. We were talking about skin. So
Yes.
Mishkan, from dwelling. Okay, it's the idea of from dwelling, Sakan, or Shakan rather, in Shekinah. So this is his glory and his dwelling, right? But you also have Betzalel. So who is tasked to make this? So you got Moses. It's credited to Moses, right? So the revelation came, Sinai, the Almighty, boom, here, Moses, this is what I want you guys to make. So, but Moses wasn't the actual implementer. He got two guys. One of them, his name is Oheliab. We said Ohel, right? So father of the tents, or father, tent father, or whatever. So tent daddy, if you will. Or you have Betzalel. And so Betzal is the Hebrew word for onion also, which is interesting, seeing this kind of, this is cropping out of the soil, like what an onion, right? Hint. So Betzal, and then El is like basically the onion god, or you could say, and so what is an onion? When you're in high school biology, this is one of the things you get to do is slice a little bit of onion skin and put it under a microscope slide, because it's one of the easiest ways to study the cell. And what does the cell have in common? It occurred to me too with respect to food. I don't know if you guys, I like cooking a lot, or I like food a lot, and so onion. If you look at what onion does, it sheds flavor and gives it up to other food, but it also takes on flavor. I don't think there's another food that is more, mirroring in that sense. Crazy. And so the Hebrew word is Betzal, and Betzal is bet, which is house, and then the Sadi, which is a wandering path, or think of a cookie cutter, right? And then the Lamed is a staff or a teaching thing. So the word Sa'al with this the Sadi and Lamed, that's usually translated as it can be translated as shadow. But what is a shadow? A shadow is also an image. It's an image, a likeness. And so I think that it is better translated as house in the image of God than in the shadow of God, right? So why would he just say, "Here's in my darkness"? So if this is getting into the idea of this is it's representative of his likeness, in my opinion. There, so
which that brings me to another point I was just thinking about in the whole image and the dwelling, because we know that, well, I'm fairly certain that you at least are aware of biblical cosmology, the model, right, which is like a flat plane with the dome over top.
Sure.
Much like the tabernacle, right? So, and I think it was David that said, where can I go? I go down to Sheol in the grave. I can't hide from your Holy Spirit. I go to the heights of the heaven. You're there. So, as Spirit fills the whole world, but Spirit, as far as I can tell, is different than His glory. And so, this house, this dwelling, that's in His image, that's where His glory can dwell on earth. And I just found it interesting that the one that you have modeled up here is shaped just like our creation model. So it's kind of like He's made a big house with a little house inside, and then He can come down inside that little house in the big house. And they're both kind of, they both look like an eye. If you're lying on your back, it looks like your eyeball. Also, bearing in mind the imagery. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's I tend to tell people I've mentioned this before. Whether someone is a they're a flat Earth person or a Bible Earth person or a baller, thinking we're on a sphere. This is something that's likened unto heavens, or it talks about in the book of Hebrews how. How does it say that? It talks about the priests that they serve in a tent that's likened unto heaven, right?
Mm.
So I can't think of a single. Go and Google the word heaven right now. Go to the image search and take a look at what comes up, and you'll never see anything that looks like, definitely nothing that looks like this, anyways, for starts, right? But no one tries to incorporate tabernacle imagery in pictures of heaven. It's like, well, how sad is that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot of different imagery, and again, that's why this Betzalel, this house in the image of God, is very. It's like, okay, well, that's pretty thought provoking once you start going at it. So it's like, well, people want to, they say they want to see God. They want to know what He's like. They want to know His character. They want to know this and that. And He's like, well, I gave you some pretty detailed instructions about my house. It's like, well, if you don't care what kind of place I live in, or, and this is where you're wanting to go, it's like, you want to go to heaven, it's like, you don't know anything about this place. So that's what's kind of blowing my mind is, I came up, I made this discovery in 2014, and as far as drawing it up, I got it kind of put up into a CAD system in order to, those who are not aware, CAD is a computer aided drafting, program to depict three-dimensional shapes and images and everything that engineers typically use for design. And you don't have to be an engineer to use it. There's a lot of people who are using a lot of
Mm-hmm.
these drawing programs. It's like when I was going to school, it's like only engineers kind of use it. Now it's like engineers and everyone else kind of. So
Mm-hmm.
the 3D modeling is such a different place in this culture and generation, time era, and everything. So anyway, as I'm putting this together and making kind of just a bare bones exegesis, that was 2014 where that was, in its infancy, and not much has changed as far as my my perception, understanding, or the the only thing that really kind of I get more details start flushing out the more I study, and I find it wonderful when people come and come along with pot shots and insults and everything like that. It's like, well, it's like, how does this apply? And it's like, what? I never thought of it that way. Because anytime I get these arguments and attack, it's like I can always, from that, I'm always gleaning something wonderful. And like,
Mm.
I almost wish people did it to me more often. It's like, just to double back and say, well, let's think about that, because if A and B, then C. So where was I going with that? Was so it's 2014 when I first discovered this, and I first released into the public sphere on Pi Day of 2015, which was 3/14/15, which is March 14, 2015,
Mm-hmm.
which happened to be when the second tabernacle reading is. So we have all this this grandiose return to Torah. It's like, well, that's nice, but people don't realize that 1/25 of the liturgical year, this is what you're studying. You're studying this, and it's I don't understand where people, they're in this pursuit, and yet they're not at least 1/25 of it. They're just zoning out still. And I go through this in fair amount of detail in my book, as far as showing all the different parts and explaining every single verse and everything like that. And I just thought that people would be catching on much earlier. So it's something I can't explain. The only way that I can find peace is say, okay, this is divine timing, and leave it at that, because otherwise it's disturbing.
And for you, like, I can see you're passionate about this. Have you ever felt like you're going to give up, or is it you just have this strong will to just keep going and doing this? And
Well, you can give up in a number of different ways and a number of different levels. And not to say that I haven't over the course of time. And after Rob died, was I basically said, okay, I'm gonna shift gears. I'm gonna get into something else. I started kind of taking up drone surveying, and which actually could be useful for tabernacle stuff. So it's between doing photogrammetry, which is 3D, realistic kind of 3D photo mapping, almost like you would do for a video game, or you could do for a video game, or surveying, where before you lay this structure out, you want to get some idea of land contour, because you don't want to just be
topography.
Erecting it on if you're gonna put it on slopes, or where there's holes or gaps in the ground, or whatever. You don't want to do that. So it was a practical skill, and I thought of it that way, as like, okay, well, this is something that I could apply for that. But I guess I have to be honest enough to say I haven't always been wholehearted enough. But then again, there's just like it goes back to, like, I can't care for someone else, and there's the expression, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them think. And you can point someone to truth, but you can't make them think. I have Lutheran background within my family. I've no longer part of the Lutheran system anymore, but my father used to talk about, well, in you can always this is more with respect to when I say the German Lutheran, being kind of autocratic and everything like that. So
that's my background.
Yeah. So and ethnically speaking, the Germans, there's a whole lot of European back and forth and all that. So I'm not trying to demonize the Germans here. It's like I've got German background in me as well. But so I actually, that's the rule of rules, right? It's like you can rip it on it, you can rip on an ethnicity as long as you're part of it.
Yeah, Mennonite background here, so
okay.
Yeah.
But you can always tell a German, but you can't tell them much. Is kind of the thing. But I think you could insert Christian in that phrase, because within Christendom, Christendom is convinced, it's like, well, we have all the answers, we have all the truth. It's like, all right, well, let's examine that truth. Okay, how does your truth compare to this? This isn't like an Oprah Winfrey. This is my truth. It's like I can prove this. There is the idea of objective truth, objective reality, and it's like if we want to pretend that everything is a matter of personal taste and preference and everything, it's like, well, now we're in a world of moral relativism where everyone is a god unto themselves. And how's that going to work out for us as a society, as a people of faith, as a people? It's just a mess.
It's like the Book of Judges. Everyone did what was right in their own sight, and there was just a lot of problems in that book.
That was I see that as a two-edged sword, right? That's a mixed blessing and a curse. The fact that they
Mhm.
did what they saw fit. On the other hand, they don't have, some overbearing government forcing them into doing something, because it's part of the promise with a king. Okay, when you have a king, he's going to take from you, and he's going to,
Hmm.
Mhm.
force you into this and that. So it's really a two-edged thing to say that in those days there was no king and everyone did as you saw fit, because they were still under theocracy at that point. Now is really the divinely, if you
Yeah.
if you look at the chaos that happened over that 400-year period of the judges, between like 1400 BC and 1000 BC, there wasn't a fraction of the mess that happened once the kings came on the stage, right? You read the
Hmm.
book of Kings, and there's just, the whole northern kingdom fell away at that time. It was just a mess. You had civil war, you had
Lots of intrigue. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, they had their cases of having judges rise up and everything, but where they needed deliverance. And yeah, it's not to say that people didn't sin, but they were still under the preferred form of government. And you mentioned the tithe. People don't consider that the tithe for the Levite wasn't 10% a year. It was
Mhm.
10% one in every 3 years.
Hmm.
And so, to think of that as like a 3% or nominal 4%, because they were doing it in the third year and the sixth year, and the sixth year was supposed to be a double portion year before the Shemitah, of course. So you have this precedent of how would I say, this expectation where like if we thought, like, if government only cost us 10% a year, we would be pretty happy people. But this
Yep.
was a government more like 3%, 4% a year.
Mm.
So to think of it, to do basic governing functions, but
Yep.
the people were expected to do governing functions of their own too, between
Mhm.
appointing
Yep.
judges and so forth. So,
At
but
the gates, you'd have the judges, and yeah.
yeah, but they weren't hired, and they weren't they weren't byproducts of the state, and this whole, we're living under various forms of statism, and the
Mhm.
state is judge, jury, and executioner, God and king, all rolled into
Hmm.
one, which ends up being dysfunctional when you have it being generated, morally speaking, from people who are, whether it's atheistic or moral relativists, or without a divine standard. Then we're basically in a world of conflict and chaos again, because
Mhm.
all these laws are you've got a man to man and a God to man thing, right? So
Yep.
some of the laws are God to man, others are man to man, but all the man to man laws then are protection of life and protection of property,
Yep.
those two things. And so when we have government exceeding those two core objectives, and you look at who owns all this land, there's in the Torah, there's no precedent for allocation of government lands, as a, for example. It was all private holdings and stewardship, and returning land to
You need to look into allodium titles, land patents. But anyways, that's
Mhm.
another whole thing. We can talk about that another day. But
That'd be like an
I,
8-hour talk.
I study that a
Yeah.
lot. So, but yeah.
Jubilee. Yeah,
Um,
we have no Jubilee. So anyway.
Yeah.
I actually want to ask you about Jubilees. Does Jubilees talk about is there anything that, any of these other books other than our, out of our 66? Is there anything that talks about the tabernacle, helped you out in knowing things, or?
Not in particular. The camp in the Book of Enoch is of interest. There's debate as to what happened to the tabernacle when it was decommissioned at the time of Solomon. Um, let's see, where am I going with this? Um, the Mishnah is one reason that they believed that while the tabernacle was in Shiloh, that they had these stone walls around it. And so they depict this structure with stone walls and still a fabric roof. Just like,
Mm,
I don't know. of any part of a structure you want to have more permanent, it's usually the vertical one where the rain is stopped and blocked. If between a roof and a set of walls, I'll take the roof usually. It's if you're trying to protect yourself from the elements. But and that's, I guess we were talking about OHEL. So OHEL actually is referring to something where you can have it doesn't need to be a roofed structure. It can be nothing more than a wall or dare I say a snow fence. So this is a different in the paradigm. And this took me a while to figure this out, that the word tent, and if you listen to was it like Rabbi Sachs, his name is, he's a guy out of the UK. He's like the big honcho, or he was. Is he deceased now? I forget. He's like the head rabbi in Europe, or in England, one of the two he was. And so he was talking about this as it relates to the sukkah, because sukkah again is different language than ohel or mishkan. And where am I going back to on that? Oh, on the ancient. So the Mishnah, it's because they use the word dalet, and dalet is the fourth letter, like our letter D. You have the Greek letter delta that's based on dalet, of course, but the ancient Hebrew word picture it's referring to a door, right? So with the earliest, and some people call that Proto-Canaic or what do you call it? Paleo Hebrew, right? So the Paleo Hebrew image being a door, and the letter. This is a case where we have the letter T. Well, if I tell you to go to the plumbing store and get me a T, well, you're going to come home with something other than a letter in your pocket. Yeah, there's that Sesame Street guy, right, selling letters. Like, how would you like to buy a letter L? So you're not doing that with those kinds of letters. But so the dalet being a door, the same way the bet or beit is a house, right? So you've got these objects for things, or for words or for letters, right? So this dalet being a door. So they say, well, because it has a door, therefore it must be a solid structure, and it's they're. And some people believe that beit doesn't refer to a tent. In the ancient, it's said to refer to a tent floor plan. Again, this is according to Jeff Benner's work, etc. But and I don't know how much that opinion varies within whether it's Orthodoxy or Judaism or whatnot. But this whether beit is referring to an actual house, a brick and mortar, a stone type, or if it's a tent or it's just a general shelter where you're living there, right? So, so this beit, this house, this is this referring to something solid? I guess my point on that. So this is why they start making these assumptions that turn into a more permanent structure at in Shiloh, at Shiloh. And I think that's kind of silly. In the New Testament, there's reference to the tower that fell at Shiloh. Well, that word for tower, I think, is really kind of rooted in Migdal, which is from Gadol. The great. To say great. Yeah. So is it the great thing? Is it this thing that fell in Shiloh? And I think that at some point. I think at some point that it did fall, and they may well have restored it, and maybe it was at the time of David. If David, he built the he said, "Why can't the ark of the Lord come to me?" So he acquires the ark, and what does he do? He sets up a tent for it.
A lot of questions of that too.
David is not a poor man, right? So when I say he's not a poor man, everyone thinks of Solomon as being the guy who's loaded, but David is the guy who did all the military conquests, and David was so loaded as far as loot. He had, I want to say that the amount of money that they dedicated the temple with in today's dollars would be between like 150 and 200 billion dollars.
Wow,
that's enough.
Wasn't even like the menorah was like pure gold, wasn't it? It was like, I can't remember the weight of it, but it was.
Actually, the menorah. I guess I would have to look at the the tabernacle menorah was only 1 talent of gold. When I say only, so think of 75 pounds of gold. But in the scheme of things, the amount of silver and gold that was used in the tabernacle would have only been closer to between 50 and $100 million. Okay, so going from 50 to 100, so the temple was 1,000 times higher as far as the raw metal value, etc. I shouldn't say the raw metal value, the construction costs of it. So David had all these spoils of war, and he, he had his share of military campaigns, and he had all these countries paying tribute to him. So when people are thinking, oh, David's just got this set up in like a tent, like from a rental agency, like if you have like, weddings, you might have a wedding in a tent outside or something like that, or a county fair or something like that. We think of a tent as being trite. We don't think of it as like, well, maybe it was this, maybe it was something like this. I suspect that David rebuilt something like that. Because he had a huge affinity towards the priesthood.
That's one of my questions actually for you is the ephod. Why was David wearing that and communicating with it? I thought only priests were to wear those.
I would have to go back and look at the language on that. The fact that he was wearing an ephod, whether he was wearing the choshen, I would be more concerned about that. Because there, that would quite arguably that could well be seen as a usurpation, but you also have, I guess, the possibility of David kind of functioning in the capacity of the Melchizedek order, or Melchizedek, the righteous ruler, righteous priest. And I'm open to that as a possibility, if not a probability, or almost even a certainty, almost. But I wouldn't. It's not a hill I would die on. But if you got that whole son of David and the the Davidic dynasty idea, and the son of David, this messianic expectation and this level of greatness, it's associated with David, not only because of the military conquest, not only because of the income, but also the spiritual and the obedience in the heart, right? So David, the man after God's own heart. People don't think of David, so why don't we call David beloved? Because this idea of David, right? So there's some people who like to, I suspect that they dislike the Jews to the point where they refuse to pronounce words like them. And I'm thinking of like Judges 12:6. You've got the idea where we're civil warring over whether or not someone said Sibboleth or Shibboleth. So this T, the sh sound or the s sound, or whatever. So they were developing some regional dialect and difference between the northern and southern kingdom, and so there's still a lot of animosity between Jewish people and the people who are quote unquote Hebrew roots, or people who are quote unquote Torah pursuant, or people who are trying to get into this Israelite, Ephraimite, whatever identity they want to either assume or project or embrace or whatever. I'm not saying it's all illegit and hostile, but on the other hand, some of it is a bit hostile. And I was talking to a rabbi in Israel, and he said, it's like, okay, well, if you guys, and he was just saying this kind of more hypothetically instead of like directed at me, because he was helping me understand this tension, right? So he says, okay, so let's say that the lost tribes are coming back, and they're Ephraim. It's like, well, which Ephraim are you? You the ones that fought civil wars against us and teamed up with Egypt and things like that. And it's like, it's a good point, And so when I hear people wanting to take on, systems of pronunciations that are so radically different than, what our Jewish brothers and whatnot have maintained for the years, it's like, when I wanted to learn Hebrew, I didn't do it at the Baptist church down the street. I flew part of the way around the world to,
Mhm.
learn it from the people who've been preserving, who've been using this at least. And people say, well, they just use it religiously and modern Hebrew's nothing like, and, that's just nonsense.
Mm.
Um, the amount of influence. So my point is shibboleth and sibboleth. And so even within Jews, you have, the Sabbath. So we have Sabbath, we have Shabbat, and we have Shabbos. Okay,
Shabbos,
so
yeah.
where the S where the tav sounds like an S as opposed to a th. So if you go looking up Strong's, it'll say with a th. Okay, so I'm not saying that was incorrect at some point in time, but we've got within Judaism, it's like you can tell if someone's basically Sephardic or Ashkenazi in their heritage base, that they say Shabbos or
Mhm.
Shabbat.
Hmm.
And that's just one point of difference. But when I see people who want to say it's Dawid and stuff instead of David, it's like, all right, or you could say Daud. Okay, so this is the interesting thing. So you have how does you spell David's name, right? Is Dalet, Vav Dalet, and so what is this referring to? It's beloved, right? So
Mhm.
he's beloved. So why don't we translate his name and just say, here we have Hezekiah. So what is Hezekiah? It's strength of Yah. Chazak is his strength, and Yah is Yah, right? So why not say this prophet was called strength of Yah, and why not say that this guy named David is beloved? So he
Mm.
was beloved, and he was beloved, towards the Father, and all this. So this is where his greatness was stemming from, right? And where's I going with that? Was talking about the greatness of David in the time of the kings, and so the amount of money that he had, and his ability to set up, probably a full blown Mishkan, and whether or not this thing fell at Shiloh or whether it was a weather thing, but it sounds like from the text that it killed people, right? The way that so this is it's just says the Migdal, I think, is the way that it comes out through the Aramaic or whatever. And again, this idea of the Gadol being great, and it's like, well, Shiloh is spelled like 3 or 4 different ways, I think, in Hebrew,
Mm.
which is another kind of interesting quirk. So we have this idea until Shiloh come, right? So it's like, well, what is it Shiloh? Because is this referring to when Shiloh comes? This is a restoration of this, because it's talking about this future tense in Ezekiel, when they're, you got both of the north and the south that are, I'm sorry, Ephraim and Judah come together as one, one stick in his hand, and they're they're serving him in a sense with one consent, and the Mishkan is above them or around them. This dwelling place. So it seems to make reference to a return to this. So so people are expecting like the third temple and nothing but. But if it's true that there's nothing new under the sun, that which has been will be again, well, why should we then exclude the Mishkan from our eschatology?
Yeah, which actually leads me to another question, is because Hebrews 8:5 says that Moses was given an exact copy, or to copy it exactly as you can and make it with the earthly materials. So that leads me to thinking that Yahweh, his tabernacle in heaven, in the heavenly realms, is like the one we have behind your left shoulder there. So when I go to Revelation, was it 21:16? It talks about the measure of New Jerusalem coming down. Would that be a cube, or would that be, a dome shape? Because I looked in the Greek word there, seems to mean squared, but when I look at the root of it, it means quarters, which can also apply to a circle or a dome or a half a sphere shape as well.
Yeah, you said 21:16 there.
I believe it, yeah. 21:6 or 16.
Yeah, okay. So we have tetragonos. So tetra. I remember playing that game with the blocks
Yeah.
falling. There's
Tetris.
always how many Tetris?
I
There's always 4, right?
Tetris, yeah. I lived in an RV for 2 years. It was always Tetris. You want to do anything, take things out, use your thing, put it back. So otherwise you couldn't walk, couldn't walk through the place.
Yep. You got to build your stack high, right?
That's right. It's to the roof. Yeah.
And the taller things got, the faster things fell.
Yeah. And we also lied to ourselves when we got it. We said it's small. We're going to be able to clean it no problem because it's a small space. Yeah. That was the dirtiest, fastest, you get dirty so fast. And then to clean it was like just, where do you put stuff while you're cleaning? There's nowhere to put it. So there's just towers of things stacked all the time. So, and the kids run through there and tear it apart. But anyway,
It's a challenge.
yeah, it's a challenge.
So yeah, this idea, and this is where I just, I started having a gag reflex to King James again. The city lieth 4 square, and the length is as large as the breadth. Anyone who's looking at that language, you can say, all right, well, this is quite clearly part of whether this is a base of a cube or this and that. The length and the breadth and the height of it are equal. Oh, that's definitely a cube. Well, what about a basketball? What if I told you that the length and the width and the height of a basketball are all the same? Is it cubical anymore? Not so much. And people cannot fathom anything besides that we do measurements like refrigerators. Because if we're not measuring something like a refrigerator, it can't be measured.
Mm-hmm.
In the States, of course, we build everything with wood pieces called 2x4s. Are they 2 inches by 4 inches? No, they're not even that anymore, right? But the point is they've kind of settled out at a standard now. They haven't figured out a way to make them hollow yet, but I'm sure they'll get there. But
that's the truth.
now,
we started it up here in Canada. We call it a beetle kill. They try to get the beetles to chew out the insides.
You're lucky if you get a straight one. Now they're all hockey sticks. It's,
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's brutal.
So our what do you call it? Our paradigms of measurement keep us going in this direction, and then our translations just add to it all the more. And if anyone has studied the tabernacle and you start to see these languages again, you see how they've omitted the language for clockwise in the Septuagint. Whoops. I thought, are things built precept on precept? Well, that precept doesn't matter so much, Saith who? Saith the translators. And so this is a case where they could have said exactly the same thing using a different language, but they didn't. And this is why, anyone who's thinking about, going toe to toe with their neighbor in some sort of exegetical, headbutting contest or exegetical, what's the word for it? When I say contest,
debate.
Yeah, some sort of sparring or something like that. Well, you can memorize whatever the English might have said, but I don't care what the English said because the paradigms in it can be just that bad. And until you've studied enough of the ancient language, it always blows my mind to hear the King James only crowd. They're telling me how that's inspired and it's equal to or greater than the original. It's like, wow, how does that work? It's like, so this divinely inspired king got involved with this and elevated it, took it to this new level because the word as it was originally given in Sinai was insufficient. That's childish. That's not childish. That's offensive. That's ridiculous. And yet this is where these people will go, and they haven't learned the alphabet. I mean, it's kind of like, a lot of times where people are talking, sacred name preferences. And it's like, well, you haven't even studied the alphabet, but then you're convinced of the way the name was pronounced because you've listened to a teacher explain it to you that way. It's like, well, I think I'll go and talk to someone else over here now. So, that's my response to that is just, I say, avoidance. And I'm not getting in an argument with that because you can't fix that. It's so when you lace pride and arrogance together, it's a dangerous combination,
Yes.
I'm sorry, ignorance rather, pride and ignorance, and arrogance, but pride and ignorance is just it's an abominable mix, and so this Foursquare thing here is like a kind of a bit of case in point. It's just like they don't know how what the Hebrew origins of that are elsewhere, and you've got the altar. I actually have as part of my my webinar series, I got a couple hour presentation on the altar, and I get into this term. We in Hebrew we got rabua, and so what is this based on? This is based on the Hebrew word arba, um, and arba is Hebrew for four, and so you got rabua is you mentioning quarters, right? So I kind of mentioned that in one of my books. There is this idea that we have 25-cent pieces. Well, yours are magnetic, of course, which is just ridiculous. Or you can pick them up with a magnet, the Canadian quarters, right?
Yeah. Some kind of metal in there.
Yeah. But it's a ferrous. It's a ferrous based metal that is usually magnetic there. But anyway, the fact that those are 1/4 of a dollar, a dollar used to be something other than a loonie, right? And it was, loonie for the American people, of course, is just like our George, except for it's in paper. It's like a Susan B. Anthony. But Canadians were smart enough to make them out of metal to instead of having all that paper waste. Although it's not paper, it's fabric, right? It's cotton. The dollar bills are, but they don't get too much wear before you gotta trash them there. So, so let's see the money, or so-called money,
The quarters.
the quarters. What shape are they? Do they have right angles on them? Do they poke holes in your pants pockets? No, they don't. They're round. So get over it. Quarters. A quarter doesn't have to have. It doesn't have to be four squared or four cornered in that cases. So tetragons. So my guess is, so you have a decagon. So a tetragon. Okay, so is it tetragon? Does it need to be four corners? Is it referring to the corners or the sides? I guess gonos. I'm not sure the root of that, but the idea that it's four sides versus four quote corners. And even if it is four corners, are there interior corners or exterior corners? Because guess what? A compass is four corners. It's four corners of the earth. It doesn't make the earth in a square shape. The fact that it has corners, and the word for corners there in Hebrew, you have the idea of extents. And so this like the idea of wings, it's let's see, kanaf. Kanaf is wing, and it's like the extent, the reaches of, so it's to say
seats.
So zitzit is on the four corners of your garments, the extents, the reaches. And so there are people who believe they're actually in the sleeves. That's how they once upon a time were. Now OSHA wouldn't like that very much because that caught in the machines, but
yes.
But
mine get caught all the time.
but the point is like, if you're mindful of where you're walking and where you're reaching, that's part of that paradigm that you're supposed to be locked into, right?
The responsibility, maybe.
Yeah.
Have you ever gone to obviously when you were there, you probably went to Shiloh and looked at the, I guess, traditional,
it was,
you say.
I talked to the head architect on the dig and was sharing the and that was actually a she back then, and she was Orthodox, I think, as was her husband. Her husband was working there as well. But in talking with them, it was funny because when I'm going to Israel, and it's like I'm taking drawings and sources that I have, and I'm like Tirei yesh po yiriot yesh po kirishim, and I'm pointing to all these things, and they're just nodding their head yes, because they know the Torah backwards and forwards, a lot of them. And then sometimes you get this pause, all of a sudden they go, oh, so, I got that far more often than I got like, like, oh, this can't be, and everything. And the thing with Jews is people don't realize is the extent to which they're pluralistic. When I say pluralistic, the idea that you can entertain multiple truths concurrently. And, some of that keeps them out of, dumb religious debates, because we tend to be so linear, on, off, in, out, whatever. And, we want to have an arm wrestle over whether it says in or on in a text. And it's like, well, what if it's both? It's like, but it can't be both in a lot. So on one hand, truth is mutually exclusive, right? So it means that, if a water glass cannot be all full and all empty at the same time, right? But the Jews will, because they've been such a, at least this is what I suspect in part of it, I think it's because they've been a persecuted minority, and they've put unity above doctrine. And you see them working that out, I think, culturally, because it's them against the world. If the world hates them, then they're like, we got to stick together, because
Yeah.
who cares what you think about, your halakha here or there, because, you can have your halakha, and I'm going to have mine, and we'll just, live a little bit apart, and we'll not, we'll not make this an issue of division, because it's better for us. The only way we can survive is if we stick together. So I think that's part of where it comes from. We could learn something from that.
Yeah, we're like, damn it, I want it my way.
Yeah, it's like, so we'll make congregations, and if you look at the they say that there's over 25,000 Christian denominations that exist, and at that point, obviously, you don't. They might be, you might end up reducing them all into. It's kind of like that, when you're reducing fractions. It's like you could say, 1 million over 10 is the same way as 100,000 over 1, right? You can, it's kind of like fraction reduction. So at that point, you probably don't really have 25,000 that, they wouldn't maybe all disagree with each other, but I don't know, enough random smatterings. It's like the color of cars that were coming out of Detroit. It used to be that you could pick the color of the car, whether or not you wanted the leather seat or not, whether or not you wanted 8-track tape, whether or not you wanted to get AC, power windows. And there was so many things in that matrix that the odds of them rolling out the same car twice in a month were exponentially improbable. So what does it mean that what they send to the dealers out of random, if you're not making it to order? Is this Burger King, or is this, do it your way type thing? How does that, how do you regulate options in that case? And so within, Christendom, we've taken it that way. It's like, well, I can get it my way. I'll just start a new church down the street, but then they start creating a statement of faith, and pretty soon it's like, well, as if the Bible's not enough, right? So it's like they tend to be saying, oh, well, I believe the Bible, I believe the Bible. So there are a lot of sola scriptura people in principle, but then they feel they gotta comb out particulars in that and then state exactly what our church is. Our church teaches this on this issue and that on this issue, this, and why it's always baptism and communion and salvation. There's like 3-4 other things. So
it's like their doctrine becomes their main identity, instead of their identity should be in Christ. Their identity is now, I'm a Southern Baptist, or I'm a Methodist, right? And we follow these creeds. And if you don't get confirmed over here in this, then you're out. Like there's no you can't go to heaven. Sorry.
Right.
So,
Yeah. It's, being raised Lutheran, they told us that, okay, other denominations could be saved too, because as long as they believe in Jesus and this and that, it was, they kind of had their own formula. They said, well, they're wrong on this, but that doesn't mean they're going to hell, and so it was just this weird, dance that they would play on, like, who's in and who's out and who's safe enough to hang out by. And, there was just a lot of, but people are comfortable with people who are like them, right? It's like, that's why people want to know. It's like, when I was in Israel. It's like, are you Jewish? What's your last name? It was kind of a ongoing obsession to figure out, because by my identity they figure out whether or not I'm a harmful agent, or a kook or a crackpot, or they want to know what to expect of me. And it's like, I can understand that people's appetite for that, for comfort, but some of it's just rooted in just gross personal insecurity. So it's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, if you don't have security in yourself and in your relationship with the Almighty, then what? Where are you gonna, how much do you engage your fellow man? And the Jews have had a history of being xenophobic, because they've been persecuted very heavily by various
Yeah.
factions of faith in part. So they're kind of like, oh, we don't trust you. We don't know if we can trust you. And so you have to be, what's the word for it? You have to be empathetic to that when you're talking and engaging with these people. So I
Yeah.
thought they were generally wonderful. But getting into this pluralism thing, so this is one of the reasons why they're pluralistic. The other one is the Bible allows for it, because you can have two concurrent truths. If I take a shape like, well, take this can right here. So is this a square, or is this round? This is a cylinder. It's kind of, there's a
Mhm.
both and component to it. And to say that it is only, it's like, well, you're missing perspective. And the word Betzalel, Betzel is the idea of image. And so this thing is it's like a diamond. It has these faces, these facets, and the facets have different vantage points at different light. So people see things in different light, and that's part of the beauty of the world. Is like, I can stand over here, it's shiny over like this. Stand over there, it's shiny over like that. And instead of just like, I've got the only light in the world, realizing that there's different people with different projections and different understandings. And so there's a richness and a depth to what they're willing to entertain. And it's like they're willing to entertain a lot more ideas than what the West is, with respect to the organized Christendom. And then the other side of it is indifference. It's like, well, you can say, well, I don't care. Then the Pontius Pilate thing, like, what is truth, as if to say, as if there is such a thing, and as if it matters, right? So that's the flip side of it, saying, well, there's no truth. And
It's kind of like
here,
the letter of the law and the spirit of the law, I guess. Like, there's many ways to interpret the spirit of it.
yep,
There's when
yeah,
Paul talks about this. To me, it's like, the spirit of the law is like, it's snowing out. Well, somebody else go have better tires. They can do 60 through the blizzard. I can only do 40 because I still got my summers on. We're still going through the both blizzard. Who's right and who's wrong? We're still making it to point A or to point B. It's
Speed
yeah.
limit is, let's say, 80, right? And everyone, another layer to that I always look at it is, sometimes you can, like the priests, they would break the law every Sabbath by holding the service. And who was it? She was talking about that. But there's the precedent. Like, the spirit of the law is to save, preserve, promote life. So sometimes, if my child is in dire need of medical attention, I'm going to do like more than the speed limit to get him to the hospital. So I'm going to break that law to preserve a life. But like Jonathan said, or if it's snowing out, to preserve life, I will slow down and drive more cautiously, right? So that's kind of how I view the spirit of the law versus the letter. Unless someone else has a better analogy, or go a bit deeper on that.
yeah. Some of it's discretionary, but some of it gets into arbitrary, or the authority of it, right? So you said it's 80, the speed limit's 80. It's like, well, I would be more agreeable to that here, because we're in miles per hour and you're in kilometers per hour.
True.
um,
Yeah.
and so that also, there is a frame of reference that it does become relevant. But then when we're all driving all together, it's like, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. There's certain social harmony sides to it, right? So whether we get into extra biblical expectations and stuff like that, there's something biblically saying, do nothing that puts your neighbor in harm's way, or something like that. And it's like, well, that's a great principle, but you're also allowed to swing an axe. So guess what? Sometimes that axe head will fall off and kill someone. But what if you knew it flew off and you said, I don't care, I'm not going to fix this. It's like, are you guilty of more than just manslaughter at that point?
Mm.
And so yeah, there's and this is why there's the measure of judicial prudence. There's to figure out what you knew, your responsibility, your intent, and whether or not there's a psalm that, or is a proverb. It says that the king's heart is like a water course, or the Almighty directs it wherever He pleases. And so there is a human element that is in effect, and that human element is there's still divine authority behind that. So it comes. The Jews say everything is from Hashem, everything is from God, right? And so everything, all authority, and that's obviously New Testament-y too, as far as the idea that there's one sovereign over all and everything, and so then nothing escapes His attention, even the sparrows, right? Are
Yeah.
that the life of the sparrows are
He knows when they fall. But isn't it in I think Psalm 133, it says that He fashions our hearts individually and considers all our works. So that'd be kind of playing into that. He hand makes every single one of us, so He intimately knows all these details about us, and then going into that psalm or proverb about directing the king's heart, so He knows how to use our hearts, right, to affect whatever end that He deems fit. So
Sure.
but that's a whole other discussion that might lend into pre-election and Calvinism and things like that. But which I don't want to shy away from that. But I'm interested to hear. I don't know how much more of your time we have. I know I have like another half hour on my phone. But is there anything else you wanted to bring up or talk about?
I guess I could go when I say to maybe just kind of a overview of some of the webinar content
Yes.
again.
Yes, I'm interested to hear about that. Yeah.
So the webinar, and I've gone for longer than I care to admit on on the aftermath. So I do Q&A sessions afterwards, and I think the longest we have clocked is 9 hours straight between the presentation and the Q&A chat and everything. So, and part of this is with some ambition of restoring some semblance of community. You got, Stephen is kind of in Fruitland at Timbuktu, and Jonathan and I were talking about where he's from in British Columbia. I was up that way, and I got flown in by helicopter to work on a hydroelectric plant, which they now just decommissioned, as I understand. And and that town was only 200 people, and but it appears on the map, and so it's like, well, to think of a place that small. I drove through the UP last week, and I when I say last week, I just got back. I guess was that Wednesday. And it said, I found one of those round window stickers, for the back of your car, and it said, the UP practicing social distancing since 1838 or something like that. So yeah, they're big on social, just because, like, who's going to get a contagious disease in the UP, with everyone that far apart. I mean, everyone comes in contact with everyone and everything, but so where did I come from on that was
your 9-hour session.
Yeah, so we've gone long, but I'm talking about the community. When I say the community shortage or vacuum that some people live in and stuff like that. So on one hand, it's a good community builder type thing, and I kind of that is part of the research and restoration. Restoration at Tabernacle is also, in my opinion, synonymous with restoration of community, because if we can't all come together at one place, now we got problems. Why is it we can't come together at one place? It's because we can't agree. Well, why can't we? Sometimes we're, when we try to resolve things, we bicker too much, or we, whatever else. There's some of these feasts that I've been to. It's like, well, you can't talk about this topic and you can't talk about that topic. It's like, it's like, really, you have that kind of level of distrust for us as attendees that we can't behave well. And it's like, well, even so, if it's not a topic, then chances are that, you just have personas that are just, it's like, why not deal with the unruly behavior on an individual basis, on a basis of persona? And so if we have someone as being unruly, then we'll correct that instead of saying, well, now when anyone talks about that topic, whether it's, calendars and feast days and the name pronunciation and Godhead and etc., it's like, well, why can't we just make sure that, people are being civil, and, let's bound it at that. Anyway, so with respect to this research and restoration, restoring the name, it talks about this being the place where he puts his name. And I guess I do get into that a little bit in some of my webinar sessions, but everyone is like, oh, it's Jerusalem and the temple, Jerusalem and the temple. And so I challenge some of that thinking as well, because the tabernacle and the Torah, the whole Torah, I joke with some Jewish friend I have. I said, do you know that Judaism is replacement theology? Because before Judaism, there was the Torah and the tabernacle. And it's like, well, they don't like to hear that, because, that, and when you go to Israel and you go looking at books in the bookstore, I'm looking through all these Jewish bookstores that have a lot of religious content. What do you guys got in the tabernacle? And they show me, it's like just 2 books. That's all you got. You got 5,000 books here, and only 2 of these, 1/25 of all your liturgical year, is focused on the tabernacle readings, and yet only 2 out of 5,000 books here are on the tabernacle. It's like there's something not connecting here. But anyway, and that's, it's because they've been stuck in the wrong paradigm on it. Now the back to the webinar objectives. So the first webinar, I'm going through, first and second, it's kind of a 2-part. I'm going through what's a lot of it's in my book, so I'm going through that, breaking that down sort of slide by slide and a lot verse by verse, so that, it's kind of designed to help equip people to understand, because it's like, if you guys walk away in just utter ignorance and say, yeah, it sounded what that guy said, it was really good. It's like, and you haven't absorbed any of it for yourself, this is a problem. This is where we have, it's like, okay, what weight is your witness? It's like, well, maybe you're generally pretty discerning, and you're pretty open-minded, and people recognize you as that and for that. But if you have no knowledge, then that comes to the top, and then it's like, okay, well, this is that person's opinion and or preference, right? So I get a lot of cosmology preference people. It's like, oh, the firmament, the firmament, the firmament. And these people are also interested in the Torah, right? So it's like, well, in the Torah, the Torah, the Torah. So, what are we commanded to do? Believe something about the firmament, or to build this house in this way? We're commanded to build a house in this way. Well, why are we commanded to do that? Well, you can speculate a lot of different ways in that. But if you don't stop and consider, it's like, well, what's the action command? It's like, if we're not doing the action command, then I think there's a lot lacking. So, being able to equip people and get them to the understanding of how this is just not fanciful imagination, is a thing of importance. And that is part of, again, research and restoration. From there, then, with everything built precept upon precept, I do get into the anatomical side. So, Stephen, you were mentioning the eye similarity. Well, I kind of started a book about, I don't know, 4 years ago or whatever, and I was kind of thick into it again, and after about a couple months, I'm like, I just have to stop. I just can't do this anymore, because I was just doing more research without putting out content, And in that whole activity, I was trying to go head to toe and look at all the anatomical connections between this and the tabernacle. And there's some amazing ones. So of things that had to do with the eye, I had 16 pages of content,
Oh, wow.
that are comparing this thing, to the human eye. And it's like, do we think this is by mistake? And we get into all this language. King James strikes out all sorts of anatomical language. They translate everything as side, S-I-D-E. It's like, well, here it's
Like the
talking
rib.
about, yeah, a rib, and here's talking about a thigh, and it's like, well, why is it that the Hebrew is using different language, and then here it's coming out in English is different, and people say, oh well, Hebrew is just a language. It can mean so many things. It's like, no, it's English that's the broken language, and stop pretending it's the other way around.
English is
Stop.
backwards. It's a brutish language. Yeah.
It's
English
Babel.
is the doctrine of accommodation.
Yeah, and it's Babel. It's a mixture.
Yeah.
It's 1/3 French, 1/3 German, 1/3 Latin origin, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And then it's 10%. So it's like 30%, 30%, 30%, and then 10% other mixed and everything. So it's like that is one giant mixture. And it's like, well, we feel really comfortable in our dirty diaper, so to speak. It's like, well, it's warm here because I'm comfortable and I'm familiar with this, right? And that's how we work that. But it has all these glaring omissions that the King James only people are just will sadly never experience anything to the contrary, and it never will awaken to any other thing. So it's like, all right, if you want to be in your system, the system that says, don't have God speak to us again or we'll die, it's like, you can take up that theology if you like, and you want a minister to intercede for you in this way. And it's like, all right, yeah, let's commit to being ignorant. Hip, hip, hooray. So anyway, so the third session I have is on the anatomical, all this rich language and everything. And again, I only kind of scratched the surface in there because I haven't had that much content. I've wanted to have people with medical backgrounds to come, and it's like, do you think I was learning about ophthalmology when I was in engineering school? No. I'm like digging all this stuff up separate, and it's like, I could just imagine if someone looks at the tabernacle and comes to learn the tabernacle from a biblical and a Hebrew perspective, and they've already got a command on anatomy, they're going to see way more things that I have never crossed my mind, never really imagined. So
A quick thing to ask you too. I've heard that like the tabernacle was like part of a hospital as well, right? Like you would bring the sick there, and the priest would look over them stuff. How if they're looking up at looking at the tabernacle, and everything's like it's going with the eyes and the joints and all that. Like, could it be like, I don't know.
Well,
Like a medical journal that you're inside of, right? Yeah.
Well, okay, so and there's a guy who kind of speaks to that. Some of that is named Alfonso Manzo. He is a naturopathic doctor and a guy who's mapping Hebrew letters into healing and frequencies and all that. And anyone who hasn't seen some of his work, it's really interesting stuff. So I think that there are things to be gleaned and learned in that, and pulled out of it in that way. So I think it is part of of an instruction, if you will, to learn how the body works and its different parts and pieces, without having to do intrusive surgery or whatever. Now, whether or not they're bringing sick people, say between sick and or unhealed, they wouldn't be bringing people in that capacity. But if you weren't, wounded in a dare I say, an oozing sort of way, did people get healing there? Yeah, I mean, if you look at the story of Hezekiah, it talks about where they were, and that was, of course, post tabernacle, but where they started resuming feast keeping. And so as they're keeping the feast again, they are Hezekiah is praying that they be forgiven because The people didn't know everything about, being clean and this and that. And it's
Mhm.
really interesting in the language. I'm just quoting the English here or regurgitating it. It says, and like, and the Lord heard Hezekiah's prayer, and He healed them. So, there's a corollary, obviously, between forgiveness and healing, I think.
Mhm.
But the other thing is uh, I guess whether or not, you create an environment, and if you have the divine presence, in your proximity like that, it's like, well, one can only infer that and assume that good things are going to happen to people surrounding it and everything. Um, so I guess on
Sorry,
the oh
sorry to throw you off. I was just
yeah.
was thinking about it.
But beyond the anatomical, then I get into dedicate a session to the priesthood, the garments. You're asking before, I think that the tabernacle and the book of Numbers is instrumental in interpreting parts of the book of Enoch, with respect to the courtyard and encampment and so forth. Um, so that I'm getting into that in the fourth session. In the fifth session, I'm getting into let's see, sacrifice, talking about, the various benefits of sacrifice that go beyond just, quote, quote, sin atonement, which it's assumed is the exclusive and only element of sacrifice, the way that it's kind of presented within Christendom. So it ends up being kind of straw man in that regards. And like, it's like, see, Jesus came and He did all this. So He did this so that we don't have to do any of this, or the assumption that, okay, well, if they wanted to be forgiven and go to heaven, they had to kill all these animals and this and that. So it's like they're setting up a false paradigm to by which to then ascribe all this power to Messiah. It's like, well, they're kind of horse trading, zebras for leopards. Is kind of what they're doing on the equivalency there. Just very strange anyway. But apart from that, I also have a session where I'm getting into some esoteric Judaism, looking at some of the wedding covenant stuff, and that there's a lot of interesting parallels that are found then again in the tabernacle, getting into the Christology, and even some of the teachings of some of the biblical Kabbalistic types that what they had to say. So I do a session on that, and now everyone will say, "Oh, now he's pushing the Kabbalah and telling people to start worshiping the dead." No, I'm not doing that. So um, everything in perspective, but and in context, I guess. With respect to the tree of life and a lot of that imagery, there's a lot of very interesting ideas. And Mount this guy named Derek Gilbert. Derek, he was pointing out the first when I went public with this on with Breaking Israel News. He's like seeing this and he's like, hey, look, it's the mountain of Yodhe Vave. And so to think of that in those, it is a mound, it is a mountain. We have the differences in English language between mound and mount, M-O-U-N-D and M-O-U-N-T. It's like, well, how are these different? And we think of a mound as more of a smaller hump, and a mountain is usually something peaked and just much bigger, right? And so there's a size threshold, and then there's a shape distinction too. But we might call something that's kind of more mounded just more of a gentle hump, and we might call that a mountain in the Midwest. Whereas like out west, it's like, well, that really doesn't count as a mountain. So I guess I'm bringing those up to where's I going with this idea of the mountain of Yod-Heh Vav-Heh. So is this what we're referring to in the text when we're reading that language? Let's see. So part of my and the seventh, I get into the altar. We're talking about the four squared or the quartered altar, and basically last I don't know, January. So I kind of I decoded or decrypted or deciphered the rest of when I say the altar, the copper altar, and it kind of left me perplexed for a number of years. So I understood it to be round, but I kind of just skipped over it. And so I feel I wasn't round on it, but the way I represent it is just cylindrical, which isn't really a reasonable way to. When I say a reasonable way to present it, it's a simple way to simplify it, but on the flip side, it's not fully characteristic of its shape, as well as getting into a mixture of its purpose and its symbology and its shapes. And so I get into that in the 7th session. So right now that's
Is it 7 days?
it's 7 sessions that are one week apart type thing. So
Okay.
I usually throw intermission week in there, just kind of give people a breather, and myself possibly, or sometimes needing some flexibility. But so I do one webinar per Saturday evening type thing, and so that's the webinar. And apart from that, I got a scale model. I got here is the manual. This is Spanish version that I have actually.
Oh, cool.
So this is getting it's a over 400 piece kit, and so I recently got back from Michigan, where we were working on doing some refinement with the manufacturing process for that. So I'm trying to gear up for that in the production and marketing world. It's there's a lot to all that, of course. So the manual
Yep.
is like it's 42 pages at present, and it's you have the problem of the tabernacle. It's really one of irreducible complexity. If you got 2 chapters where it's like "Thus saith the Lord," and it's like, well, we can ignore this whole sentence because we don't care about it that much. It's like we don't get to do that. We're not really granted that as we're not entitled to do that. And so why would we do that? Because if the word is good and it comes from a good God and so forth and so on, then why not treat it as if it's important, and why not treat it as something worth learning, right? Because we've always wanted to just glaze over it, and it's like, all right, well, we've done that for centuries or for decades or years, days, weeks, months, years, decades, and centuries. And where's it gotten us? It's dumbed us down quite a bit, And so
Well, like Proverbs 30, sorry to cut you off. Proverbs 30 is, I think it's verse 5 or 6. Every word of God is pure, tested, and stands. So if he said it 4 or 5, 6,000 years ago, it's still good today. And like you said, context matters, but if he says this is good and this is bad, then it's still going to be good and bad today. Malachi 3:6, he doesn't change, right? So
right,
that annoys me as well, that people are just like, that doesn't apply anymore. That's, we don't have to worry about that. Wave the hand. It's like, these aren't the droids you're looking for.
right,
And yeah, and it's just like, do we believe this book or not? Like, it's, yeah, so that just kind of popped in my head when you were saying that. It's, and then you were talking earlier about truth. Do you want to just give a quick breakdown of that word? I have a couple minutes left on my phone, but I was just interested to hear the breakdown of that word truth, because when I looked into it in the concordance, it seems to be something that's like almost like a peg that you can hold something with, and it doesn't move ever. It's kind of the imagery I got from it, if I recall correctly.
Well, the imagery I get from it really is, so the Hebrew word for truth is amet. They say amet, or in truth, or truly, or really. And so amet is like basically AM and T, or AM and Z in English. So what are those letters? What are they like? They say amet, aleph, mem, and tav. You've got the first, the beginning, and the middle, and the end. So right there, it's speaking of the whole thing of totality. Okay, the totality, the end all be all of everything. And so, I never thought of this. So Ima, is the word for mother. And so you start with Amma. The is referring to the mother. And then the end of it, Mut or Met, Mem and Tav, is referring to death. So this is cradle to grave. This is the totality of something,
Mm.
in that sense. So Tav is the end letter and the intersection, and Aleph is the leader and the strength, and Mem is sometimes the chaos in between, and Mem is shown as like water waves, and it's speaking in terms of this potential and this vastness. So you got those elements are being conveyed in what we see as quote quote truth, Amet. So
Huh, that's awesome.
yeah, thank you. Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem. So the the webinar series, again, starting on December 2nd here, and then concluding in January. I've also got the new shop that I'm kind of starting up into with the scale modeling. So between rent, tools, materials, all that, I'm hoping people see value in this, and will contribute, help sew into this ministry effort, because it's like there's a lot of different things that could be done. One other thing that I forgot is Jonathan, do you have that link? You can share that.
Yes.
So I have a I don't know which one worked for you, but
I'll screen
the
share it here and pull it up.
yeah, if you could screen share it and just go through, let's just kind of touch on this, because this right now is at a kind of a pivotal stage. I've been working on a woman from Australia who's a professional. She does teaching modules for a living, for a profession. So we have Beit Shaddai here, which is the Levite Study Academy. And what we're doing is we're taking the tabernacle content more or less from the book, and we are adding to it. We're making this more kind of friendly and interactive, and she's just her name is Kim. Kim is just excellent to work with, and we are right now we have developed a lot of the introductory content here, and I'm trying to get feedback from homeschooler people, or just enthusiastic study people. So we're looking to have this on my website, where we're gonna have a certain portion of it free, but then some of it's gonna go. I will have it where I'm hoping to expand the scope and getting into developing a lot of homeschool modules, but those would be, that would be a paid thing. And so I want to make it so that people have got this, so it's accessible, also affordable. I know people from different countries are like, yeah, I'm really interested in your stuff, but buying the book, the shipping is so expensive. So to have this as an online resource, that's showing the map of a lot of the modules and the elements that are within this, and little helpful pointers along the way, and so it's designed to do kind of aptitude testing, or see how you are doing in the end. So as far as your absorption of the content, and it's
So this will be really good for homeschooling and stuff like that, and just
Yep.
all kinds of things.
Yep, that's the plan, is making this for combination of Sunday school, homeschool, or dare I say Sabbath school type. Anyone who's interested in learning tabernacle stuff. The point of this is not to drive various doctrines into people's heads. It's to bring up this tabernacle research and restoration. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
I love it. I can't wait to check that out. I'm kind of more ADHD. I kind of get lost in things, and that looks like a very clickable, get lost in it kind of website, which I love.
It's very navigable. It's easy to navigate, and it's the layout. We're putting a lot of thought into that. So not to say that none of it will change, but so we're looking for feedback right now from anyone who wants to do some test driving of this. This is kind of beta test module that we want to get whatever feedback that the community has to offer, and then incorporate whatever lessons learned we get from that, and kind of finish it out, flush it out that way. So
Yes, I do believe it's on your website, right? This one, or is this the new one?
I need
That's
to
not yet.
post that as a link. I have a link that's jumping to the to that host right now. It's being hosted off my website, but the plan is to host it on my website. But right now there is a website link on my website, but it's not. It's built into my website, but it's not anywhere a selectable thing. And so this is something I have to do in days to come
Okay.
yet, because this is really to the point where we just have this. I was going to share the link in Facebook and all that, and
Okay.
but if we can put that in the YouTube description,
Yes. Yes, I can do that. Yeah.
but so once it's in the YouTube description and the link will expire, but we'll maintain it and make it so we'll have that link where it jumps, to the wherever the new resource is as we modify some of that. So right now
Awesome.
it's again in beta test world, and it would be very nice if you guys can do some beta testing. And my website is project314.org. And so if you go to like the comments section, you can file your comments, and you can celebrate or complain all you want. So
Sounds good to
No,
me.
for sure. We'll put that out there, and yeah, I'm excited. And we got your website on the link as well in the descriptions. And is there anywhere on your website where if people want to donate or
yeah, I
Patreon
do.
or any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, thank you. I do have a PayPal button on that. It's not on the homepage, shame on me, but at the bottom you can go to the bottom, and it talks about get involved, and there's a link for donate.
Okay.
So anyone who wants to get behind this, I'm going to be doing this modeling effort. It's going to take months. I mean, it's a real undertaking. I did it with an 1/8 scale, and now if I'm going to double that to a 1/4 scale, it's twice as big. So we're looking at 20 feet, I'm sorry, nearly 50 feet in diameter. It would be a little bigger than it'd be a little bigger than a 1/4 scale. So it'd be 1.3 decimal point. So to get that into scaling ratios, but the idea there is to have a physical where we can you can walk inside it. We had that 1/8
Mhm.
scale where you could walk underneath it, but we had to prop it up on tables because the size of it, the headspace was a little more than, it was like 7.5 feet tall, but you start losing headspace because the
Yeah.
shape of the dome. But once we propped it up, we still fit 50 people under it comfortably. So when you get a 1/4 scale, now you're looking at something that could easily accommodate 300-400 people.
On the full scale, how many people could be in there at a time?
Thousands. I mean, probably maybe
Oof.
5,000. I forget. I
Oh
ran the
wow,
numbers at some point, but
that fit a
um,
lot of Levites. That's good.
but this is a question of who's allowed inside. It seems to be the priest is going in there in the morning and the evening, and I'm not under the impression that this was a place where the congregation was congregating. It's
Yes.
kind of like a picture of Eden, right? So if you're kicked out of Eden, who's coming back into Eden, and under what terms and conditions. So I think there's the fact that this is, where's the toilet in the tabernacle? Well, guess what? There's none. And
Oh,
we think of, we've been calling churches or whatever. It's like, well, this is the house of God. Um, we've called that, to use that term to describe churches for many years. And it's like, well, these are places for us to go. If this is a place for him, he's like, he says, I want you to make this so that what? I may dwell in their midst. It wasn't so they can come into my, and for them, they're drawing near, and they're drawing near through sacrifice. We have all this religious system out today where it's just like, we have, everything has gone YouTube, brought to you by Nike and Pfizer. I mean, that's this is where sponsorship of a lot of this, quote unquote ministry comes from. So, without people engaging into the old school, it's like when Solomon was talking about making this his house, he's like, and when they sin and when they pray towards this place, the place that I've built, the prayer, in my opinion, is kind of idolatrous. Because he's getting them to pray towards the place. And when he gets the message back from the Almighty, he says, I have heard your prayer, and I've accepted this as a place for sacrifices. So, to have this as going back to the place of sacrifice thing, it's like, well, um, and they were, the people who were coming to build, it was the sanctuary shekel, it was the equivalent of like $20 in silver, $30 in silver, or Canadian $40 in silver, maybe.
Mm.
Although your maple leaves are very pretty, your silver
Yeah.
maple leaves are very nice, but you get my point. It's there's the no one will appear before me empty-handed, and we've lost that in religion because we're taught that sacrifice is no longer a responsibility we have. This is just because Jesus is the ultimate sacrifice and therefore the only one. It's like, okay, but if we're supposed to be like Jesus, then what? So
Yeah.
I just gotta say, I gotta cut and run. My phone's just about to die. I don't want to just drop out, and I'd love to sit for another 5-6 hours and talk with you, brother Andrew. That was
We'll
my head
we'll
hurts.
get
I
you
got a lot
back
of
on.
information. Yeah, that was a lot to stick in my brain. So I'm gonna check out that link. And I hope everyone that watches this likes, share, subscribe, share it wide and far. I think it's truly at the very least it's intriguing. At the most, it's got some pretty far-reaching implications. So I've got a ton of other things I could think of that I'd like to talk about, but unfortunately, I have low technology skills, so I just have a phone at this point. I don't have a computer. So, but yeah, I'm super grateful that you came on and were willing to share all this with us. And I'm gonna listen to this a few times over and over and try to soak up every little thing. And I'll try to write down as many questions as I have for next time.
uh-oh. Oh,
Uh
that's no.
oh. Hope 3 a.m. emails coming at you. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, and I just want to say shalom and thank you, everyone. If you and Jonathan want to keep talking, I'll plug my phone in and listen. And I'm also falling asleep a bit too. So, but just want to say shalom and thank you guys. And see you guys on the next one.
Good night,
All right.
Stephen.
Thanks,
Good night.
Stephen. Good to meet you.
Good to meet you.
Yeah, so yeah, we're at 2:12. Okay, so we've been 2 hours 12 minutes. We're looking good, but definitely yeah, my wife's gonna want to come in. We're kind of just off. My office is right next to our bedroom where you can't. But anyways, I would really love to have you come back on and share more stuff, and I'd really like to get into Melchizedek with you one day and the priesthood and how all that works. Definitely something that I like to in studying in, and Stephen and I think you have a lot more to offer than stuff I don't know yet, especially when it comes down to the Hebrew and understanding the language better. So love to do that sometime if you're ever interested, and you're always welcome to come on here. And I want to I would like to really try to figure out how I can help on this project. We live so far away. I'm not sure how that looks or whatever, but I'm really enjoying. And you've been on my heart for the last couple of years. I think it was I think now my wife said it was about almost 3.5-4 years ago when I did your seminar with you, and it was really good back then. So but any last words or anything before we call her a night? And
Yeah, I mean the social media thing. I hate to getting into that cliche, like, share, and subscribe. It's really I'm not asking anyone to like it. I'm asking people to
no,
love it.
yeah,
And there's no, I wouldn't say there is a love button or there's a heart button or so-called heart button, but and really thinking of this outside of and beyond the social media norm. I haven't been just dumping out lots of content at random. Just there's a lot of just there's so much out there that how can we keep track of it all, and then how do we sort through it all, how do we weigh it all, how do we value it, and so forth. And so having discussions like this is good, and having so I tend to not like the just having another channel of monologue stuff out there. I mean,
mhm.
um and so sometimes it's scarcity is what makes things valuable a little bit, but there's also a divine timing and divine, because this is very it's paradigm shifting, but it's also, I think it could be seen as very threatening to a lot of people. There's been a lot of teachers who've been teaching the other thing, about the box model and everything. It's just and so we have to be able to, kind of handle some of that with kid gloves. And I have to kind of be mindful myself to not just turn into like a big, mockery fest in this. And um just trying to be forbearing with people who think differently, or just who aren't, open enough to, we have to, I guess, maintain civil discourse. And sometimes that's hard to do in light of people who are frustrating you. And so I guess just when I say the sharing and I think that one thing that the advantage to this is like, it's a rediscovered truth. And
Mm.
from that standpoint, it only stands to um it only stands to be poised for growth. And the fact that this is all rooted in the word. I challenge anyone to buy any Tabernacle book on the subject matter. I've got all the Art Scroll stuff that they put out, between Rashi and Ramban, and then I got some other ones that are Jewish, actually published in Hebrew. And it's like they all are just devoid of technicals and actual data and explanations how things work in the physical. And it's like, this is, if people want to restore the sacred name, this is a way to do it. Because if you have a god of a shoebox, you're either representing the wrong guy, or you're representing him in the wrong way. You're representing him as an incompetent engineer, and just a vague and a poor communicator. And he's none of those things. And so if we want to elevate, him in this, this is part of it. It's restoring his house.
Yes.
So again, whether we're doing it mentally, virtually, or physically, right? So again, I got models that are available on my website. You can get to, and that's, to get the family engaged in it.
I was actually going to share that too, just as you're talking, because I wanted to show people your website here too, as we are doing this. But yeah, just as you, that's his website there. And yes, there's lots of information there. And then you said, if people want to have expertise to help you in some of the stuff, is there a place on here too? Is they
Yeah,
can
I do have a section there that's dedicated to being able to share articles from other people. It's not populated because really no one's engaged that. But as far as the if you roll, there's one, get involved there. So you asked about donations there, but
right
as far
there.
as volunteering time and funds and getting into social media engagement, that's one place where it says in the Proverbs, don't go around bragging about yourself. Let other people, do that or not, and it's like, I'm not saying everyone's got to say I'm great. I'm saying that what I have here is great. And it's great because of its point of origin. And it's in my opinion, it's a divine origin. So you can evaluate for that yourself, or, if it is or not. But, to think that he made something that rickety and that bizarre and useless, it's just not in his character. And so I'm hoping that people can start to see this as above the whole, like, well, what's the shape matter,
I was gonna say at the beginning of this, I totally forgot. And when we first started, the opening was Proverbs 18:13. It's he or whoever answereth a matter before hearing it all out is folly and shame unto him, right?
Folly and shame.
And that's, to me, is like this. Like, if they don't hear you out, if they're not willing to, then they're not worthy of what's. So it's definitely we need to take this into consideration, and hopefully we can start sharing this out and as best as I can, and really comes down to numbers. What's it? Farmers and stuff when they have chickens, like we grew up at little growing little chick hens, meat birds, and you would get about 20, 30, 40% more, because in the first week or two most of them die off, right? And so we can spread this out as far as we can, so we get there will be lots dying off, but we get the good quality ones and try to find that. That'd be good. That'd be awesome.
Yeah,
for
again,
your,
sometimes your testimony is, again, in direct proportion to your own command of the subject matter. So there's the, I'm happy when people are sharing, but I'm happier when they're studying and then sharing,
yes,
because then you become a credible witness. So
good. Then we're getting you back on again. Help us study. I really appreciate this, and I really enjoyed it. And I was so excited to have you on, and I was all shaky and nervous this morning. And my wife said, "Why are you so nervous?" I'm not. I'm excited. So I'm so glad you came on, and you've been a blessing. And we'll talk soon and start having some more. Any final last words before we call her a night?
thank you.
Hour and
Baruch,
20 minutes.
yeah. Thank you. And again, Baruch Hashem. That's blessed be the name is the
Amen.
so thank you.
All right. Well, we'll call her a night, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks,
Have a good
Jonathan.
night.
All
Bye.
right. Bye.